So it sounds like you're trying to figure out, like, when is the best time to start daycare for your kid
Hmm.
here in Canada? It's a big decision, no doubt. And it looks like from the articles and notes you sent over, you're really trying to weigh all the different factors.
Hmm.
Been there. But don't worry. We're going to unpack all of this together
Yeah.
and hopefully give you the clarity you need to make this decision.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating how much the daycare landscape in Canada has actually changed, even just in the last few years. It's not just your traditional licensed centers anymore.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And we're seeing like all sorts of new options popping up, like those hybrid programs that combine like the in-person learning and the online learning. I mean, that could be a game changer for parents who need a bit more flexibility. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think that's a really great point. And there's even more specialized programs that are catering to like specific needs and interests. For instance, we're seeing a rise in Indigenous-led programs that weave cultural teachings into their curriculum,
Yeah.
and also programs that focus on like specific learning styles
No.
or, developmental needs.
Wow, that's amazing. There's so many options out there now.
Yeah.
I bet that can feel a little overwhelming, though, when you're trying to make the best choice for your kid. But let's break it down. Let's look at some of the benefits of daycare in general. We all know, daycare can help with things like social emotional development and getting kids ready for school. But what does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, think about it this way. In a daycare setting, children have the opportunity to interact with other kids their age, learn to share, cooperate, and navigate social situations. These are essential skills that really set them up for success, not just in school, but in life. And I think especially after all the disruption and isolation of the pandemic, these social experiences are more important than ever.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like a little microcosm of the real world
Mm.
where they can practice those all-important social skills in a safe and supportive environment. And what about the school readiness piece? What are some specific skills that daycare can help foster that will give kids a leg up when they start kindergarten?
One key area is language development. Research shows that children who attend high-quality daycare programs tend to have larger vocabularies and better language comprehension skills than their peers who stay at home. They're exposed to more words, more conversations, and more opportunities to actually practice their language skills. And that early language development is so critical for later literacy skills, like reading and writing.
Wow. I hadn't really thought about it like that before, but that makes a lot of sense. So it's not just about keeping kids busy and entertained while parents are at work. It's actually laying the foundation for their future academic success.
Exactly. And beyond language development, daycare can also help children develop important cognitive skills like problem solving, critical thinking,
Yeah.
or creativity. They're constantly engaging in activities that challenge them to think, explore, and learn.
Plus, I imagine being in a daycare setting helps kids get used to a more structured environment, with routines and schedules. That's got to be a huge help when it comes time to transition to kindergarten.
You're absolutely right. That ability to follow directions, transition between activities, and manage their time is incredibly valuable in a school setting.
So it sounds like there are a lot of potential advantages to starting daycare. But let's be real. There are also some potential downsides to consider. I think a lot of parents worry about things like cost, separation anxiety, and even just the thought of their little one getting sick all the time.
Yeah. Let's address those concerns head on, starting with cost, which is often the biggest hurdle for families. Even with the Canadian-wide Early Learning and Childcare System, we call it CWIL, LCC, aiming to make daycare more affordable. The reality is that it can still put a significant strain on a family budget.
Oh, for sure. Budgeting for daycare is no joke.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how the CWIL-CC system actually works? I know it's supposed to help with affordability, but I'm not sure everyone understands the specifics.
Yeah, you're right. It can be a bit confusing to navigate. Essentially, the CWIL-LCC system provides financial assistance to families based on their income and needs. This can come in the form of direct subsidies to licensed daycare providers, which reduces the fees you pay.
Okay, so that's where the $10 a daycare we hear so much about comes into play.
Exactly. That's the ultimate goal of the CLLCC system, to make quality daycare accessible and affordable for all Canadian families. However, the rollout has been gradual, and not all provinces and territories are at the $10 a day mark yet. It's important to check with your local government to see what's available in your area and how to apply for subsidies. There are also other forms of financial assistance available, like tax credits and deductions.
So it sounds like it's definitely worth doing some research.
Yeah,
And seeing what kind of financial support might be available to you, that could make a big difference in the overall cost of daycare.
absolutely. Don't be afraid to ask for help and explore all your options.
So let's talk about the emotional side of things. I think separation anxiety is probably one of the biggest worries for parents, especially when they're thinking about sending their little one to daycare for the first time.
It's completely understandable to feel anxious about leaving your child in someone else's care, especially when you see those heartbreaking images of little ones clinging to their parents at drop-off. You've shared an image called separation anxiety. That really captures that feeling, doesn't it?
It really does. It's like a punch in the gut for any parent. So what can parents do to help ease that separation anxiety, both for themselves and for their children?
Well, the first thing is to remember that separation anxiety is a normal and healthy part of child development. It shows that your child has formed a strong bond with you, which is a good thing. But that doesn't make it any easier to deal with in the moment.
For sure. So what are some practical tips for navigating those tough goodbyes?
One of the most effective strategies is to establish a consistent goodbye routine. Keep it short, sweet, and reassuring. A quick hug and kiss, a cheerful "I love you, see you later," and then leave. Don't linger or try to soothe them for too long, as this can actually prolong the upset.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can see how dragging it out would just make it harder for both of you.
Exactly. And consider leaving something familiar with your child, like a favorite blanket or stuffed animal. It can provide a sense of comfort and security when you're not there. You can even create a special bye-bye ritual with the object, like giving it a kiss, or whispering a secret message for you to hear when you return.
Oh, that's a sweet idea. I love that. And what about those times when the separation anxiety is just really intense, like full-blown meltdown territory? Any advice for those extra tough moments?
In those moments, remember that your own anxiety can actually amplify your child's anxiety. So, as hard as it is, try to stay calm and confident during drop off. Your child will pick up on your cues. So, take a deep breath, put on a brave face, and trust that they will be okay.
Easier said than done.
I know.
But it makes sense. We have to be the role models for calmness, even when we're feeling a bit frazzled inside.
Exactly. And remember, the daycare staff are trained to handle these situations. They've seen it all before. Trust them to care for your child and help them settle in. They have their own tricks up their sleeves to distract and comfort little ones.
That's reassuring to hear. I,
Yeah.
I think sometimes we forget that they're the pros when it comes to this stuff.
Absolutely. They do this every day. And they know how to create a safe and nurturing environment where children feel comfortable and loved.
Okay, so we've covered cost and separation anxiety.
Hmm.
Two of the biggest concerns parents have about daycare. Um, what about the dreaded daycare germs? It seems like kids are constantly bringing home sniffles and coughs. Is there any way to minimize the risk of illness?
Unfortunately, there's no magic bullet to prevent all illnesses, but there are definitely things you can do to reduce the chances of your child getting sick. First and foremost, choose a daycare with strong hygiene practices. Make sure they have clear protocols for hand washing, sanitizing toys and surfaces, and handling sick children.
Yeah, that's so important. You know, when I was touring daycares before my son started,
Hmm.
I was really paying attention to how clean everything was and how the staff interacted with the kids. It's all about those little details.
Absolutely. And you can also talk to the daycare about their illness policy. Find out what their threshold is for sending kids home and how they communicate with parents about outbreaks.
That's a great point. It's all about communication and being informed so you can make the best decisions for your child's health.
Exactly. And don't forget about those everyday things you can do at home to boost your child's immune system. Make sure they're getting enough sleep, eating a healthy diet, and washing their hands frequently. It all adds up.
So true. It's like a multi-pronged approach to germ warfare.
Exactly. Every little bit helps. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the actual process of finding and choosing a daycare. We've touched on some aspects already, but let's dive deeper into the nitty-gritty details.
Yes, please. This is where I think a lot of parents start to feel overwhelmed. There are so many options, and it's hard to know where to even begin.
You're right, it can be a daunting task. But don't worry, we'll break it down into manageable steps. The first step is to gather information. Start by talking to other parents in your community. They can offer valuable insights and recommendations based on their own experiences.
Word of mouth is always a good starting point. I know I got some of the best leads from other parents in my mom's group.
And don't underestimate the power of online resources. Check out daycare websites, read online reviews, and explore local childcare resource centers. They often have directories of licensed daycares in your area, with information about their programs and fees.
And then, once you've narrowed down your options, it's time for the fun part, daycare tours.
Yes, schedule visits to the daycares that pique your interest. There's nothing like seeing a daycare in action to get a feel for the environment and the staff.
What are some key things to look for during a daycare tour? What are the red flags that should send parents running?
Pay attention to the overall vibe of the place. Do the children seem happy and engaged? Do the staff interact with them warmly and respectfully? Does the space feel clean and welcoming? These are all important indicators of a positive and nurturing environment.
Those are great points. I remember when I was touring daycares, I was really drawn to the places where the kids seemed genuinely happy, and the staff were clearly invested in their well-being.
And don't be afraid to ask lots of questions. This is your chance to get all the details and make sure it's the right fit for your family. Ask about their curriculum, their daily schedule, their approach to discipline, their policies on illness and emergencies. The more you know, the more confident you'll feel in your decision.
So it's really about doing your homework and finding a place that aligns with your family's values and priorities.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to daycare. It's all about finding the best fit for your unique child and your family's circumstances.
So let's say you've done your research, you've visited some daycares, you've asked all the questions, now it's decision time. Any tips for making that final call?
It can be helpful to create a list of pros and cons for each daycare you're considering. Weigh the factors that matter most to you and see which one comes out on top. And don't be afraid to involve your partner or other trusted family members in the decision-making process.
That's a great idea. Sometimes it helps to get an outside perspective.
And remember, there's no such thing as the perfect daycare. Every place will have its strengths and weaknesses. It's about finding the best fit for your family's needs and priorities.
That's such an important reminder. We tend to put so much pressure on ourselves to find the perfect solution.
Yeah.
But sometimes good enough is actually great.
Exactly. And trust that you'll make the right choice. You've put in the effort, you've done your homework, and you have all the information you need to make an informed decision.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to that central question you posed at the beginning. How can you make the best daycare decision for your unique child?
Yeah, we've explored so many important factors: the benefits of daycare, the potential downsides, the importance of quality, signs of readiness, managing separation anxiety, and even tackling the financial side of things. But at the end of the day, it boils down to knowing your child and trusting your gut.
I love that. You know, it's so easy to get caught up in all the research and expert opinions. But ultimately, you are the expert on your own child. You know their temperament, their needs, their strengths and challenges.
And speaking of knowing your child, let's talk about how those individual differences might impact your daycare decision. Is your child naturally outgoing and social? Or are they more introverted and need time to warm up to new people and situations?
Those are great questions to consider. It's like a personality assessment for daycare readiness.
Exactly. And think about your child's developmental stage. Are they mobile and curious about the world? Or are they still content to cuddle and observe?
It's like a puzzle figuring out how all these pieces fit together.
It is. But it's a fascinating puzzle. And with a little bit of research, a lot of self-reflection, and a healthy dose of intuition, you'll be able to piece it together and find the best solution for your family.
So we've talked a lot about what to look for in a daycare, but I'm wondering, how do you know when your child is actually ready to state daycare?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There's no magic age or one-size-fits-all answer. But there are some signs of readiness you can look for.
Okay, like what? Give us the inside scoop.
Well, first and foremost, can your child handle short periods of separation from you without becoming overly distressed? You know, we've talked about separation anxiety. But if your child is having extreme difficulty being away from you, even for a few minutes, it might be a sign that they need a bit more time to develop their independence.
That makes sense. It's like they need to build up those separation muscles before they can handle a full day at daycare.
Exactly. And think about their basic self-care skills. Can they feed themselves, go to the potty, communicate their needs? If they're still very reliant on you for these basic tasks, it might be worth waiting a bit longer.
I hadn't really considered those self-care skills before, but it's so true. They need to be able to function somewhat independently in a daycare setting.
Absolutely. And on a more practical level, is your child sleeping through the night? And eating a variety of foods. Daycare can be disruptive to sleep and eating routines, so it's helpful if your child is already in a good rhythm.
Okay, so it's all about setting them up for success by making sure they have those foundational skills in place.
Precisely. And remember, readiness isn't just about the child, it's also about the parents. Are you emotionally ready to let go and trust someone else to care for your child?
Oh, that's a huge one. It's a big emotional leap for parents, too.
It is, and it's okay to feel a mix of emotions: excitement, anxiety, guilt. It's all part of the process.
It's so true. And I think it's important to acknowledge that there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to daycare decisions. What works for one family might not work for another. It's all about finding what feels best for you and your child.
Absolutely. There's no need to compare yourself to other parents or feel pressured to do what everyone else is doing. Trust your instincts, do your research, and make the choice that feels right in your heart.
I love that advice. It's so empowering. And speaking of empowerment, let's talk about how to advocate for your child once they're in daycare.
Communication is key. Establish a strong relationship with the daycare staff. Share information about your child's needs and preferences. And don't hesitate to ask questions or raise concerns.
It's like a partnership, working together to create the best possible experience for your child.
Exactly. And remember, you are your child's biggest advocate. So speak up if you feel something isn't right, or if you have suggestions for how to improve things.
That's such an important reminder. We often feel like we have to just go with the flow. But it's okay to assert ourselves and make sure our child's needs are being met.
Absolutely. And if you ever feel like your concerns aren't being addressed, don't be afraid to escalate things to the daycare director or even look into other options.
So it's all about being proactive and involved in your child's daycare experience.
Precisely. And remember, daycare is just one chapter in your child's life. It's a valuable experience, but it's not the be-all and end-all.
That's a great perspective to keep in mind. It's easy to get caught up in the daycare decision, but it's important to remember that it's just one piece of the parenting puzzle.
Well said. And now, as we wrap up this deep dive into daycare decisions, I want to leave you with a final thought-provoking question, considering all we've learned. What aspects of daycare quality matter most to you and your child, and how will you prioritize those in your search?
Ooh, let that question guide you as you navigate this exciting and sometimes overwhelming journey. You've got this.
You've absolutely got this. Remember, you're not alone in this. There are resources available to support you, and we're always here to help.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into daycare decisions. We hope you found it informative and helpful. And remember, trust your gut, do your research, and make the choice that feels right for you and your family. Until next time, happy parenting.